Hi, and welcome to Global Sports Care. Today, I've got a special guest and also a special subject to speak about, and that's injury prevention. And not injury prevention for everything, but of a special sport, which is futsal. And futsal is a growing sport in the world, and I think one of the most fantastic sports out there. And I've got my friend Daniel. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Marcos. Thanks for having me here.
Daniel, do you mind telling what you do and what your interests are, and you're at the moment in California, a little bit about yourself?
Yes, definitely. So my name is Daniel Verdejo del Fresno. I was born in Spain, but then I moved to England to do my PhD. I did a PhD in exercise and sports science with Manchester Metropolitan University. And I started to work for the FA. I met you over there, and we spent very good years working together with the England futsal national team. I spent 8 years in England, and then in 2016 I moved to here to the US, to California. I had a good opportunity so I decided to take it. As you said, I like futsal as well. I grew up in Spain, so we play futsal over there. I was working in futsal in England, and I am working in futsal here in the US. So I think that is why you said that I am an expert, but I don't know about that.
And yes, you want to tell us a little bit about the science of prevention of football. Obviously, me as a doctor, you treat people, but I think it's more important that you actually avoid injury. And as futsal is growing, I think we need to promote a little bit of injury prevention.
Yes, definitely. So I prepare a little presentation after we talk, and I will cover the main characteristics of futsal, then some scientific studies about injuries in futsal, and then the main ways to try to prevent injuries to happen in the sport.
Okay, off we go.
Okay, so let me share the screen. Okay, and then we can start. Okay. So can you see the screen, doctor?
Good, yeah.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to talk about the incidence of injuries in futsal, and the first thing we should analyze is the sport. So we should analyze the main characteristics or the profile of the sport, in this case futsal, and then the second part that is very, very important is to analyze the profile of the players, of every single player, because that's one of the ways to basically understand way better the sport and our roster, our squad. So futsal is a 5 versus 5 game. It is in the high level, it is played indoor, but could be played outdoor. The court is 40 by 20 meters, so it's a bit bigger court than a basketball one. Okay, so we play 5 versus 5 in a bit bigger court than basketball. And like in basketball, when the ball goes out, the clock stops. We play 2 halves of 20 minutes, but with those stoppage times, at the end, a futsal game has a duration about of 87 minutes. Okay, as you can see here, 87 minutes, then 10 minutes half time. So we have a ratio work rest very, very similar to 1-1. It's 50% of the time you are playing, 50% of the time you are resting, or the game is stopped because the ball is out. If we now analyze the playing intervals, as you can see here, the 75% of the time, the interval of the game is between 1 to 18 seconds. After 18 seconds, the ball is out, so the game stops. And then the resting intervals, so when the ball is out until we play again the ball, the 83% of the time is between 1 to 15 seconds. So as you can see, again, the ratio working, resting is very, very similar to 1-1. However, this is very, very important. Futsal is a very, very intense game. So when we are playing, when we are on the court, over the 85% of the time that we are on the court, we have a very, very high heart rate, super, super high, as you can see on the graph. And the average of our heart rate is over 174 beats per minute. So as you can see, when a player in futsal is on the court, is working very, very intense, so much intensity, so much sprints, so many chain of directions, and there is no time, like for example in football, to walk or to rest if the ball is on the other side of the court. Just to really sum up, general characteristics, most of the actions and the resting periods are around 15 seconds. Usually there is 4 pauses in 1 minute, and the ratio of work is 1-to-1, with about 15 seconds working, 15 seconds resting. So high intensity sport with very, very brief periods of time to rest. And then usually a player cover 4.5 kilometers per game. But the thing is, the 50% of those kilometers, they are at high intensity. So with all this background about the general characteristics about the sport, if we now analyze the injuries, we can see here a table that I designed. If we analyze the incident rate of injuries, so basically the number of injuries that happens per 1,000 hours, we can see here that there is, the studies, they are not very, very conclusive, because the numbers, they are very, very different. We can compare here those two studies that they are super different numbers. Some studies, they only consider the training hours, and studies, they consider the match hours. So there is no much science conclusive about the incident rate. If we analyze now where the injuries happen, basically number 1 is the ankle. All the studies, they have a high rate, a high percentage of ankle injuries. The second one should be the knee. So we have ankle first, knee second, and then on third place we have thighs, groins, and hips. That area is the third injury location in futsal players in almost all the studies. If we now go into how the injuries, which kind of injuries we have, the main injury is ankle sprains or sprains. Then we have muscle strains, and the last one is contusions. And if we analyze how the injuries happen, if we go here on the last column, again we have big differences between studies. We cannot really say that most of the injuries happen on non-contact actions or contact actions, because depending on the study, we can see that the percentage are completely different. So for me, just to sum up futsal's injuries, ankle is number 1, the knee is number 2, the thigh is number 3, and then we have also hips very, very close, with groins around. Sprains are the type of injury number 1, strains are the number 2, and then we have the contusions at number 3. It seems that girls, they have more injuries than boys, but it's not also conclusive. And then about the contact injury or no contact injuries, we can see this video here about if futsal is a contact or not contact. Futsal is a contact sport, but there is studies like leaning towards most of the injuries happen through contact. As you can see on this video, there is a concussion on the player on blue when the player hit the ground. But at the same time, we have so many studies that they say that most of the injuries happen without contact. So we cannot really define if in futsal contact or non-contact injuries are the main cause of them.
Okay.
This is something that in the future, I think, doctor, we should analyze. Or futsal is a new sport. There are not many studies in futsal, so science needs to keep working on this. And then something very, very interesting that it has been happening in the last years, let's say in the last 5-6 years, and some of the experts, they are trying to analyze, and they are even calling ACL pandemic in futsal, or is like the number of injuries that happen in futsal on ACLs. So on this video we have, I just put together some injuries on ACLs on different players, and something that is very, very interesting is that some of those injuries happen because of contact. Others, there is no contact at all. It's just the player completely alone. And another interesting thing is that some of those players, for example, Lozano, or for example, Mati Rosa, Lozano suffered in 3 years 2 injuries on the same injury. And Mati Rosa, for example, had 2 injuries in less than 15-16 months, one on the right knee and the other one on the left knee. So the ACL is something that I really think, as a futsal experts, we should start analyzing, studying, and see if there is any pattern, or if there is something that we can do with our futsal players to basically prevent those kind of injuries. So this one, for example, is the Sergio Lozano second one.
And Daniel,
yes.
When it's changed 5 years ago that people got more ACL injuries, did anything change in the sport? Did it get more athletic, more, more, any changes in during this time?
I think, honestly, that futsal, as you said at the beginning, is a growing sport. And as a growing sport, that means that the game is developing. And yes, I agree with you. The sport is becoming more professional, and because it's becoming more professional in all of the countries, the players, they are training more. So that means that the players, they are faster, stronger, and then the game is becoming a bit more physical. Yeah. I don't know if that is the reason, but yes, definitely the game is becoming way more physical than years ago.
Well, that similarities to rugby, where this happened there as well. So if it gets more physical, this could be one reason. But yes, probably needs to be analyzed academically a bit better.
Exactly, because also maybe the shoes, the type of floor that the players are playing could also have some impact on the rate of injuries, but we don't really know.
Okay.
So with all this background about injuries, the main idea for strength and conditioning coaches, for sports scientists, is to try to create programs with the players to rehabilitate them. So basically to make sure that they are in good conditions to avoid those injuries. And the main ones is to do those proprioception exercises, or those balance exercises. Another one is to have a very, very strong core. So all the core stability exercises are very, very important. And then finally, for those injuries on the thigh, most of them, they are hamstring injuries. As you can see here, Asklin in 2013 developed this hamstring protocol, and I think it's something that we should implement to basically prevent players to have injuries. Also, strengthening. This is the program that, for example, UEFA recommends in the UEFA Futsal coaching manual that they have. This is the strengthening, the gym program that they recommend for the futsal players. Then I really think that foam rolling is super important to release muscles, and there are so many studies about their benefits. And then finally, stretching. Even there is some controversy about when, how to stretch, but go to your place, analyze your players, and then implement this kind of protocols, adapting them to your characteristics of the players, the environment, and everything. And finally, and I think this is super important, Doctor, everybody knows the FIFA 11 plus protocol. Basically, it is a warm-up program to prevent injuries in football. It is developed by FIFA. There is so many studies behind that, and basically it was developed and studied and applied in football. That is the protocol. But also recently there are some researchers and universities that they have applied this FIFA 11 plus football warm-up into futsal. But there are two, I think here is important, there are two ways. This is a warm-up to prevent injuries. So if we try to implement this to improve fitness, the studies say that the FIFA 11 plus does not alter physical performance of amateur futsal players. So the protocol does not improve the fitness. We have another one here that basically they say the same, that it's not basically making any impact on proprioception or balance in short or long-term effects, and also it's not improving the knee muscle strength. So if we want to apply this just as a way to improve fitness, the study says that it doesn't work. However, it is working perfectly if we apply this as a strategy to prevent injuries in youth futsal players. So there is a study over there that they really found that the protocol, and it was performed in 2014. I think it was in Iran, and basically with youth players, FIFA 11 prevented the number of injuries. Also, in Portugal, there is a guy that is applying this with senior players, amateur senior players, and again, as you can see here, it's a very recent study. I think it's from last year or this year. The application of the FIFA 11 protocol basically reduced the number of injuries in the lower limbs during the season in amateur futsal players. And the same group basically they seen that it seems reasonable to suggest the use of the FIFA 11 plus to reduce the injury risk in futsal players.
So what would you say then, in amateur futsal players, generally would you recommend them to do the FIFA 11 plus, or would you alter it a little bit?
So the studies they say that yes, in youth and in amateur futsal players, the FIFA 11 plus works. So yes, I would definitely recommend it. However, we don't have studies yet if this works in professional futsal players, because nobody has had access to implement the program in a professional environment yet. But I would really recommend it, definitely, no doubt, doctor. And then I think it's something very important that also to prevent injuries, to control and monitor the players. That is what at the beginning of this presentation I said about, we know the sport, but also we have to know our players. So we can monitor the recovery and regeneration points that players they can get, analyzing the nutrition, the hydration, the number of hours that they sleep, if they are relaxed or they have stress. Then it is important basically to ask how they feel. So with a very simple RPE scale, those are very, very simple methods that everybody can apply on your own club. You can, if you have a bit more technology, you can analyze the urine osmolality, or you can just analyze the urine to know if they are hydrated or not. And then I think, as you remember, we implemented that in England, but also when I was working for Libya. There are 3 tests that we have been doing: sit and reach, squeeze, and counter movement jump. And basically, we did that every morning, and we are not really analyzing the performance of the players on those tests. What we see is the trend. We want to see if the players, they are basically keeping the same numbers every day, or if they are tired and their performance on the 3 tests goes down because they are stiff, or because they have problems on the groins, or because their muscles are tired. And then there is another test, which is the ankle dorsiflexion test, as you can see on the picture, that it has been very, very, the correlations between the performance on this test and the risk to suffer an injury is quite high. So controlling and monitoring the players could, I think, help to prevent all this overtraining or overload muscle injuries. Of course, we are talking about the non-contact injuries, because the contact ones, we cannot really do anything with those. But if we can reduce some injuries, they are more than welcome to reduce some injuries. So to finish, yes.
When we come back to the, I think with the urine osmolality, explain, I think you do this because there are studies which show that if you're not well hydrated, you do bad decisions, and you are more likely to come into trouble with contact injuries, isn't it?
Correct. So of course we were lucky because we had this device, but if you don't have the device, you can educate the players just analyzing their own color when they go to the bathroom. Basically, I think it's key that we educate players. But yes, that was the reason.
Keep hydrated. Yeah.
Yes, keep hydrated. Anything from here, doctor?
No, thank you.
No? Okay. So just to finish, very, very quick, as a general, in futsal, the lower limb is where most injuries happen, but ankle, knee, hips, and thighs are the specific locations. The type of injuries: sprain, strain, and contusions. It seems, but there is no conclusive studies that female athletes, female players, they have more injuries than male. I don't really know the reasons. I can give you my opinion. I think is.
Do you know which injuries? Do you know, obviously in female football players have more ACL injuries. Was this looked at in futsal? What injuries were more?
It is exactly the same. knee injuries and ACLs, they are quite high in female futsal players.
Okay, so
And
similar.
I think one of the reasons could be because female futsal is not as professional as male futsal. So the demands of the sport, they are very similar, but if the players, they are less fit or they train less, or you know what I mean? Maybe that could be one of the reasons. Then this is something important. There is no differences between the positions. So, you know, in futsal, there are basically 4 positions, like the goalkeeper, the backman, the 2 wingers, and the pivot. There are not big differences in between positions or in between injuries regarding the position. And there is no a clear cause versus contact versus non-contact. ACLs is something that, as I mentioned, in the last 5-6 years, it has been increasing. And I really think that all the prehabilitation routines, core, proprioception, hamstring, and a general body strengthening program should be implemented in all the players. The FIFA 11 Plus design for football, in my opinion, should be implemented also in futsal, because the studies in youth and amateur players show that it works. And also, I think controlling and monitor players with different tests or with different tools to educate them and to try to individualize their training load could also help to reduce the number of injuries in futsal. So if you want, I can stop sharing my screen now, and then we can have a dialogue here, or I don't know if you have any question.
Yes, I think, you know, when you looked at all the research regarding injury prevention, what is quite interesting is that most of the injuries are ankle. Are there any specific ankle protocols or strengthening protocols where there's been some research to prevent injury?
So most of the injuries in ankles usually are ankle sprains. There is no specific studies applied to futsal players. Of course, there are so many protocols to recover from an ankle sprain, but there is nothing specific on just futsal players.
So that would be probably something which might be something to research or implement next to all the other things you said.
Yes, there is, in my opinion, there is so many things that right now in futsal could be a study or could be a research, because, as I said, it's new sport, it's growing, so we need more science.
And I think the other thing which we obviously discussed in the past is, because of the difference of the sport being more high intensity sport, the value of making your players more fit in high intensity exercises, yeah, which also might reduce injuries.
Definitely, I think that could be key. As we saw at the beginning of the presentation, futsal is a high intensity intermittent sport. So the training that we do should be in that direction. So HIIT sessions should be implemented, and I think also futsal is played in a hard surface. So the training should be also on a hard surface, because because your body is basically adapting to the sport.
Yeah. So I think what I basically, when I want to put it all together, I think, you know, as take-home messages for amateur futsal players. So people, you know, who don't do this professionally but love to play on a weekend, you know, with their mates some futsal, and during the week train a little bit. What would you say? You know, do the FIFA 11 plus, and then that's the minimum they should do?
Yes, definitely. For me, the FIFA 11, if you look into detail, you have basically everything there. So you have a bit of strengthening, you have a bit of proprioception, a bit of balance, a bit of hamstrings. It's very quick. So for those amateur players that they just train a bit during the week and then they play during the weekend one game, just spend 15 minutes before the game or the session warming up, performing the FIFA 11 plus.
Okay, and then if we go to the professionals, what would you say is they're the most important? Would you say get them fitter, get them stronger, and you need to survey them to see if they're not too tired? Or what would you say is the take-home message there?
So if we go into the professional environment, the first thing is we have to analyze the profile of each player, so we can individualize their needs. And yes, some player maybe need to improve the core, some player the hamstrings, some player strengthening, but individualize their fitness requirements. That is one. And the second one, try to control their training load and I would say the invisible training, the routines that they do outside training, like behaviors, habits, sleeping, eating, drinking, that helps definitely.
Well, I would say it's a great overview, Danny. And I think well, number one is I will put your contact details obviously at the bottom of the video. And also, you know, if anybody's interested to do some research in futsal, I'm sure Danny and myself are happy to help and advise because we think the sport should be put a bit more onto the front line, and hopefully at some point it will be more popular like it is in Spain and in other countries. Is there anything else you want to mention?
No, yes, of course. Thank you very much for having me here. And we know that we love futsal, and everything helps to try to develop the sport. So thank you for this initiative. Thank you for this opportunity, Marcus.
Well, thank you, and let's hope we see more of futsal in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Thank you.